Okay, so welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going somewhere pretty intense, I think. You ready for this?
Always. I've been looking over the material you sent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a lot to process.
Yeah, we're tackling some really big ideas this time. We're
Yeah.
talking about reality itself. Like, what is it? How do we know? And then, like, how should society be structured? And we're looking at some, honestly, pretty radical visions of where humanity might be headed.
Right. And it's not just like off-the-cuff thoughts. What's interesting is these are attempts at like full-blown worldviews. They're connecting philosophy, technology, and politics in ways I haven't really seen before.
Exactly. These aren't just, barstool theories or something. The people behind these ideas are serious. They're trying to build whole systems of thought. And some of their conclusions get, well, pretty out there.
That's part of what makes it so fascinating, though. It's like a challenge to our own assumptions.
Right. And so what we're going to do for you listening is try to navigate this material. We're going to find those core arguments, unpack the logic, because even when it leads to some wild places, there is a logic there. We want to understand the thinking.
Absolutely. It's about grasping the architecture of these ideas, even if we end up disagreeing with the blueprints.
Perfect. So let's jump right in. One concept that immediately grabbed my attention was this idea of the word Reich. Now, on the surface, it's presented as a utopia, a perfect society built on pure logic.
Ah, yes, the word Reich. I remember that. It's striking how ambitious it is right from the start. A kingdom of the one, they call it. Not based on power or tradition, but on logic, supposedly.
Right. But as you dig deeper, it takes some pretty unexpected turns. The basic principles are, well, let's just say they're not your typical political science stuff.
Definitely not mainstream. What really stands out is the scale of their thinking. To base an entire society on pure reason. It's audacious, to say the least.
So let's get into the specifics. The material cites Plato's Republic as kind of a model for this word Reich. They call it a language game. And the idea is that the ideal society should mirror the ideal state of an individual mind, like perfect order both within and without.
I see. Yeah, so they're drawing a direct link between individual psychology and the structure of society. It's a very Platonic idea, that pursuit of ultimate truth as the guiding principle for both personal and political life.
Exactly. And a core principle of this word Reich is super simplicity. The idea is to focus on the big picture, the fundamental logic, rather than getting lost in the weeds of details. It's about those core principles first and foremost.
Super simplicity. Interesting. It seems they're trying to create a system that's both comprehensive and easily understood. It's a delicate balance. Whether it's achievable in reality is another question.
Right. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and potentially controversial. The constitutional changes they propose are, well, let's just say they turn some heads. They want to limit voting rights to parents only, a one-child, one-vote democracy.
Wow. So only parents have a say in governance. That's a radical departure from our current systems.
Yeah. And property rights would be tied to marriage, and you could lose property in a divorce, especially if you have kids. And maybe the most surprising thing, they see children not just as the future, but as active participants in society. Reformers and revolutionaries, they call them.
Reformers and revolutionaries,
Yeah.
that's a heavy mantle to place on children. It's a fundamentally different view of their role in society.
The reasoning behind all this is to promote what they call transcendental self-interest. It's about the well-being of this larger one, which they identify with future generations, with the children.
Yeah.
And they contrast this with local self-interest, which they see as more limited and potentially harmful.
I'm following. So they're trying to shift the focus from individual desires to the long-term good of humanity. It's a very utilitarian perspective.
Right. By restructuring things like voting and property, they believe you can incentivize people to prioritize the future over their immediate needs. It's a big bet on human nature.
It is. And in their vision, this future is one of abundance, driven by automation. Children would receive a survival package covering their basic needs. And there's even this idea that they could work without pay, contributing to society not out of necessity, but out of this inherent future-oriented drive.
Yeah. It's a very different way of thinking about work and value. In a world where machines do most of the labor, what does human contribution look like? They seem to be grappling with that.
It's a question we'll all have to face sooner or later. And it's interesting that they place so much emphasis on the role of children in answering it.
And on a more intense note, they propose a foundational law in this word Reich, the death penalty for anyone involved in child abuse. This is non-negotiable, a cornerstone of their society. It really highlights how central children are to their whole vision.
It's an extreme measure, but it reflects a deep moral conviction about the importance and vulnerability of children. It's a stark reminder of the stakes involved in their worldview.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about technology, because it plays a huge role in their thinking. They believe that humanity, right now, is in a state of mental disorder. We need what they call a philosophical exodus.
Mental disorder is a strong diagnosis. They're clearly not happy with the current state of human affairs.
Right, and they see technological progress, especially automation, as a revolution that could lead to the rise of the child. Like, technology will free us from the limitations of our current thinking, allowing this new generation to emerge.
It's a kind of techno-optimism, but with a very specific philosophical twist. They're not just celebrating gadgets, they see technology as a tool for fundamental societal transformation.
And get this, they envision the internet evolving into the Olympic Logos Games. It'd be this competition to determine who's closest to the one, to this ultimate truth. The idea comes from Plato's view that stories shape identity. So it's about figuring out who best embodies this truth through their communication.
The Olympic Logos Games. It's an intriguing concept. They're essentially proposing a meritocracy of ideas where the most compelling and insightful communicators rise to the top. It's a very Platonic idea, that connection between language, truth, and identity.
And this brings us to the poetic algorithm. Now, this isn't your typical algorithm like you see on social media. It's designed to measure something they call scope of association in language, these networks of words and poems, to identify who best embodies the word of God.
A poetic algorithm. That's a bold attempt to quantify something as abstract as the quality of thought and expression. They're trying to measure wisdom, essentially.
Exactly. They even compare it to the tennis of words, this competitive arena of linguistic skill. It's about using language to get as close as possible to this ultimate truth.
It's a very interesting idea, though I wonder how you'd objectively measure something like that. There's a lot of subjectivity involved in interpreting language.
They acknowledge that. But they envision using all sorts of media. Audio, video, shared libraries of visuals, everything from classic paintings to emojis, which they call the new Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Emojis as hieroglyphs. That's a creative analogy. But I see the point. They're recognizing that communication goes beyond words.
Right. It's a multisensory thing. And they believe that this poetic algorithm, by identifying those closest to this ultimate truth, will create a kind of trickle-down consciousness.
Yeah.
The best communicators will shape how everyone else thinks.
It's an interesting model, but it relies heavily on the assumption that this algorithm can accurately identify and elevate the best thinkers. That's a lot of faith in technology.
And they admit there's a tension here. This meritocratic ideal clashes with how the internet actually works, which they see as driven by an anti-poetic algorithm. They talk about attention-grabbing tactics, tribalism, controlled hallucination.
Yeah, that resonates with a lot of the criticism of the internet today. The constant battle for our attention, the echo chambers and filter bubbles, the spread of misinformation.
Right, so they're very aware of the dark side of the digital world. And this leads to one of their most controversial proposals, the Geist chambers.
Ah, yes. The Geist chambers, a very provocative and unsettling concept.
Yeah. They describe them as a way to exterminate the ideologies holding a firm grip on their minds. They even use the term memocide. It's about actively dismantling harmful belief systems.
It's a chilling thought. It raises serious questions about the limits of free thought and the ethics of manipulating people's beliefs, even for what they see as a good cause.
Definitely a topic that deserves careful consideration. Now, let's move on to their attempt to define a logical God image. They start with Cartesian doubt, questioning everything. And they conclude that if you were the last person on Earth, you'd have to admit that you are fundamental to reality.
Interesting. So they're starting from a point of radical skepticism and arriving at a kind of subjective idealism. If nothing else exists, your own consciousness becomes the only certainty.
And from there, they introduce the God formula, GOAT OS. They call it a language game of language games, a pyramidal network, where the simplest game contains all the others. It's like the ultimate logical framework.
The God formula. It seems to be a central pillar of their thought. They're attempting to create a unified system that encompasses all knowledge and experience. A very ambitious goal.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to write the operating system for reality itself. And this leads to the idea of poetic engineering of godliness. They talk about poetic justice warriors, PJWs, who would animate this God formula, representing it using the fewest possible characters.
So it's back to language again. They see these PJWs as masters of communication, able to express profound truths with incredible conciseness and power. It's like a fusion of poetry and philosophy.
Exactly. But they also acknowledge a potential problem. What if the wealthiest people simply pay these PGWs to represent their interests? It could create a form of ideological control, even within this supposedly meritocratic system.
It's a valid concern. Any system that concentrates power, even intellectual power, is susceptible to corruption and manipulation. They seem aware of that risk.
They also reimagine marriage. It becomes a form of self-transcendence, shifting motivation towards this transcendental interest. They talk about a marriage score and a love vigilante to enforce this.
Love vigilante. Wow. It's like they're taking the idea of social engineering to an extreme, but it aligns with their goal of subordinating individual desires to the collective good.
Right. They even propose a bifocal or dual transcendental focus for political engagement. You focus on the child and the dying parent, trying to encompass both the beginning and the end of life in your decision-making.
It's an attempt to broaden our perspective, to make us think about the long-term consequences of our actions. It's about connecting us to the past and the future.
Now, let's look at some of the critiques and challenges they address in their own material. They flat out state that free speech is a figment of human imagination. They say we lack awareness of our most fundamental motivations, so true free speech is impossible.
That's a radical claim. They're essentially saying that our unconscious biases and desires control what we say, even when we think we're speaking freely.
And they introduce the concept of compounded axiomatic error. Our understanding of reality, they argue, is linguistically constructed. So if our language is flawed, our whole worldview will be flawed.
It's a reminder that language isn't just a neutral tool. It shapes how we think and perceive the world. And if our foundational concepts are wrong, it can have a ripple effect throughout our entire understanding of reality.
They also critique philosophy itself. They call it a chaotic language game, lacking a central focus. They say without that focus, philosophical inquiry becomes fragmented and unproductive.
It's a call for more unity and direction in philosophical thinking. They seem to be frustrated with what they see as a lack of progress in traditional philosophy.
And they make a pretty bold claim about most philosophers. They say they fail to question their irrational will to life and therefore can't truly justify their own existence or the existence of anything else.
That's a deep challenge. They're questioning the very foundation of our desire to live, our instinct for self-preservation. It's a very existential critique.
And they even suggest that this word Reich might not be achievable here on Earth because of what they call mental pollution.
Yeah.
The existing false God images, the ingrained beliefs and ideologies make it too difficult to implement such a radical change.
So they're acknowledging the limitations of their own vision. The inertia of existing thought patterns and cultural norms could be too strong to overcome.
It's a sobering thought. Now, we have to talk about this figure they call the Platonic Führer. This individual explicitly states their goal is to redeem Adolf Hitler by inverse engineering the Third Reich and also to destroy Plato.
That's intense, to say the least. It's shocking and paradoxical. They're invoking a figure of immense evil, Hitler, and then saying they want to redeem him, and at the same time they want to destroy Plato, who they previously presented as a key influence. It's hard to grasp what they're getting at.
Right. And they're clearly being provocative. They use strong, even offensive language, and they say it's a deliberate psychological filter to attract a certain kind of follower, someone who's not easily shocked or offended.
It's a risky strategy. It could alienate a lot of people. But it seems they're looking for a very specific audience, people who are willing to engage with unconventional and potentially disturbing ideas.
They also have an interesting take on humor. Jokes, they say, are concealed statements of truth, and laughter is a reaction to a painful truth resurfacing. It's a darker view of comedy than we're used to.
It's a thought-provoking perspective. It suggests that humor isn't just about entertainment, but about confronting uncomfortable realities that we might otherwise avoid.
And they give a really disturbing example of this inverse engineering. They compare the Volkswagen emission scandal to the gas chamber. It's a shocking analogy, and frankly, I'm not sure what to make of it.
It's a highly questionable comparison. It seems like a desperate attempt to be provocative, to shock people into paying attention, but it risks trivializing the horrors of the Holocaust.
Yeah, it's a misstep, in my opinion. This Platonic Führer then issues what they call a peace offering, but right alongside it, they declare a third and final world war. If that offering isn't accepted, it's a very extreme ultimatum.
It's a strange mix of peace and violence. They're presenting their ideas as both a path to salvation and a threat. It's a very confrontational approach.
They also mentioned previous attempts to influence the Western intellectual elite, using terms like exodus and blitzkrieg. The blitzkrieg apparently was a 14-page epic poem attacking various targets.
So they've been active for a while, trying to spread their message through various means. The poem suggests a creative, if somewhat unconventional, approach to engaging with intellectual discourse.
And then there's this God button, or REM mode, which they claim would automatically trigger the emotion you ought to feel. It's a vision of technology controlling our emotions.
That's a frightening thought. The idea of technology dictating our feelings, overriding our own emotional responses, raises all sorts of ethical concerns.
Now, let's delve into their ideas about reality and the mind. They bring up the Cartesian brain split, the idea that the limits of our world become the limits of our senses, leading to questions about the true nature of matter.
It's a classic philosophical problem. How much of what we perceive is actually out there in the world, and how much is constructed by our own minds?
They also discuss the simulation argument, but they interpret it as a pro-God argument. If we're living in a simulation, there must be someone or something that created it.
It's an interesting twist on the simulation hypothesis. It shifts the focus from the nature of reality itself to the question of who or what might be behind it. It's a kind of backdoor argument for the existence of a creator.
They use the dream analogy, too, the idea of Mahamaya. Each person exists in their own dream world, leading to misidentification and a lack of true shared reality.
It's a powerful image. It highlights the subjective nature of experience and the challenges of truly connecting with others. We all inhabit our own internal worlds.
And they describe the mind as a map that we construct over time, implying that we all inhabit different mental times based on our unique experiences.
The map metaphor is helpful. It emphasizes the dynamic and personalized nature of our understanding of the world. Our past shapes our present, and no two maps are exactly alike.
They mention Kant's Copernican revolution in philosophy, which solidified an immaterialistic logic of reality, the idea that our minds actively shape our experience of the world.
Kant's work was a major shift in how we understand the relationship between mind and reality. It's not just a passive reception of information. Our minds actively structure and interpret what we perceive.
And of course, they bring back the God formula again, c²= p/m, the ultimate expression of logic based on absolute doubt. It seems to be a constant reference point for them.
It's their foundational principle, the bedrock of their system. It represents the ultimate truth they're striving for.
When they talk about social engineering, they point to law and money as powerful tools for behavioral engineering. They shape who we are by incentivizing certain actions and discouraging others.
It's a reminder that our economic and legal systems aren't neutral. They actively influence our choices and shape our behavior, whether we realize it or not.
They even give the example of fiscal incentives for interracial marriage and procreation as a way to address racism. It's a very direct application of economic principles to a complex social issue.
It's a controversial idea, but it shows how seriously they take the idea of social engineering. They're willing to consider radical solutions to achieve their goals.
And they introduce this concept of the economic Skinner box. The online environment, they say, is a system that rewards certain behaviors with attention and engagement, shaping how we act online.
It's a fitting analogy. We're constantly being nudged and manipulated by algorithms, and it's easy to fall into patterns of behavior that are reinforced by the system.
And they suggest limiting the amount of content online to combat information overload and tribalism. It's a call for a more curated and focused digital space.
It's a radical solution, but it reflects a growing concern about the negative consequences of the current information deluge. Whether it's feasible or desirable is another question.
Their ultimate goal, as they lay it out, is to move beyond our individual egos and identify with the One to achieve cosmic consciousness.
It's a mystical goal, a striving for transcendence. They're talking about a fundamental shift in consciousness, emerging with something larger than ourselves.
And they believe this can be achieved through poetic engineering. They talk about moving towards increasingly complex minds, bifocal, trifocal, and finally, spherical or godlike.
It's a fascinating idea. They're proposing a kind of mental training program using language and concepts to expand our cognitive abilities and achieve higher states of awareness.
They mentioned the geometric representation of the God formula again, those interlocked triangles, like a visual symbol for their entire philosophy.
It's a powerful image. It encapsulates their core ideas in a simple and elegant form.
And finally, there's this concept of redemptive patricide. The Father eternally dying to be reborn as a higher version in the Son. It's a recurring theme for them, symbolizing this ongoing process of transcendence.
It's a powerful metaphor for growth and evolution, the shedding of old limitations to make way for something new and better.
So, wow, that was a lot. We've explored this incredibly dense and often strange landscape of ideas. The word Reich, the poetic algorithm, social engineering, the nature of reality and consciousness. It's a lot to process.
It is. It's a challenging and often unsettling journey through a very unique worldview.
And I think it's fair to say that some of these ideas are pretty out there. Some are disturbing, even offensive. But our goal here wasn't to endorse or condemn them, it was to understand them, to see how they connect, where the logic leads, even when it leads to unexpected or uncomfortable places.
Exactly. It's about engaging with difficult ideas, even when we disagree with them. It's about expanding our own understanding of the possibilities of thought.
So, to you listening, we leave you with this final thought. What are your own fundamental beliefs about reality, about society, about the future? And how did you arrive at those beliefs? What are their foundations? Take some time to really reflect on that. It's worth it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.